As promised earlier, I am back with a new video. So the video will be on whether India can start a trade war, economic war with China, as some media people like to suggest. Some people are breaking Chinese-made TVs and showing it on TV channels like Republic TV are airing such jingoistic messages. Some of their programs in which they articulate these views are in fact sponsored by Chinese companies like Vivo. Very funny things are happening. Is it possible for India to completely boycott Chinese goods? This is what I want to talk today. For that, we should know what India imports and what India exports from China. So if you see, I will show you the data. So last year, India imported around 2019 $70 billion from China, whereas India exported around $17 billion, 17. So the total, trade deficit, exports from China were $17 billion, exports to China. Imports from China are $68 billion, with a net trade deficit of $51 billion. The trade deficit used to be around $60 billion, but it has come down to some extent in the last 3-4 years, not because something India has done, because of enormous pressure put by US to make China open its economy to imports from other countries. So that has also benefited India. India has increased its agricultural and service sector imports to China in the last 3-4 years, particularly fruits, vegetables, rice and all those stuff. But China mainly exports manufactured goods to India, from plastics to chemicals to metals to electronic goods to electrical goods to capital goods which are needed for power production, for example, telecommunication equipment, everything. They keep exporting solar panels, automobile plants, of course mobiles, everything they keep exporting to all the countries, not only to India. So the reason is China is the factory of the world. They have the lowest manufacturing cost in the world. So that's the reason why China has trade surplus with almost all the countries in the world. So India does not have, of course, has trade deficit only with China. So India, if you take the top 20 countries, the trading partners with India, India has trade deficit with out of the 20 countries, 16 countries. It has trade surplus only with this data shows that in China the trade deficit is somewhere around $51 billion. With US, India has trade surplus. With UAE, India has trade surplus, but last year it was a trade surplus because of low oil prices. Otherwise, normally it is a trade deficit. With all other countries, with Saudi Arabia, with Germany, with Switzerland, with all the developed countries, Hong Kong is also politically part of China, South Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, all the countries, India has a trade deficit. With UK, India has a trade surplus. With the Netherlands, India has a trade surplus. So India has trade deficit with most of the countries. In fact, last year the overall trade deficit itself was around $150 billion, whereas China has a huge trade surplus almost with all the countries. With a few countries in Africa, China has trade deficit because they import raw material from those tiny countries like Mozambique, Rwanda, etc. Whereas China exports mostly manufactured goods to these countries. So there is a basic problem in the way our economy functions. So that is the reason why no country is able to match the low production cost of China. So first, let me stick to the point of, as I said in the beginning, I said whether it is possible for India to stop the imports from China. First, let us talk about the economic point. So let's say, hypothetically, that India stops all the imports tomorrow. So $70 billion loss to China. Is it going to hurt China? No, because in 2019 the overall Chinese exports were $2.7 trillion. $2.7 trillion. That is $2,700 billion or $2,700 billion. So $70 billion is a very small amount. It is around 3% of overall Chinese exports. So it's not really going to hurt China at all. Yes, minor thing will be there, but the overall Chinese exports of $2.7 billion itself is a small fraction of the overall Chinese GDP of $14 billion. So China in fact is encouraging its own people. It has a huge domestic market, 140 crore people with a per capita income, nominal GDP, not even PPP, of around 9,000, 8,700 dollars per capita income, whereas India is still less than 3,000. So they are encouraging their own people who are become very rich, prosperous over the last 2-3 decades to consume more. What they are producing, they want their own people to consume rather than it exporting. They want reducing export dependence. China over the last decade has reduced the share of external trade, which used to be close to 40% of more than 45% of China's overall GDP, has now come down to 22-23%. So that is a deliberate ploy to reduce the dependence on other countries. And if you see, if of course China will take retaliatory steps if India stops all the Chinese exports, which is not possible under WTO. China will also take countermeasures that will also stop India's exports of $17 billion. So that is the more valuable for India. I'll come back to that. So if you talk about the import, India's import, it is China's imports from China are the maximum, around 14%, followed by US. If you talk about exports, India is, as I said, India is also exporting to China. So last year we exported around $17 billion. That is the third highest market. China is the third biggest market for India. First is US, followed by UAE. Third is China. It is around 5%, 5.3% of India's overall exports go to China. So this 5%, China will immediately stop. For China, the loss is 3% of its exports. For India, the loss is 5% of its imports, which is more natural. China imports 14% of Chinese imports are 14% of India's total imports, but is only 3% of China's exports. So, whereas India exports 5% of its exports to China, that China will block it. So the loss to India is 5% of its overall exports, whereas to China the loss is only 3% of its overall exports. So it will hurt India much more than it will hurt China. Secondly, certain things what India is importing from China, we cannot replace. Most of the China is exporting to all the countries simply because it is a manufacturing cost is very low. The reasons I will tell later. If you take one particular thing, take mobiles. You'll be watching also more likely in your mobile, which may be Xiaomi or Vivo or Apple, which are Chinese companies. In 2020, the share of these three companies in Indian telecom market is now 72%. Samsung and Apple are occupying the niche higher end market. If you take it, Samsung S series, starting I think around 65-70K. The same features you can get it in an Apple phone of around 13,000. So why should, of course, if you have Apple, it's a status symbol, but the same features you can get it at 1/5 of the price. Why should you buy? Of course, if people are in the upper category who want the status symbol, can always buy Apple iPhones, but there is no need for a common man. He can get the best. Samsung is South Korean, Apple is of course US. Even if we buy those two companies, most of them are manufactured in China, though they are owned by South Korean company and Apple American company. Most of the components are manufactured in China. So that is the power of China. You can't take it out. So if you stop the exports, it will be hurting. Of course, the rich people don't buy Apple or Vivo. They will be buying Samsung, Apple only, iPhone. But the poor people, are buying mostly Chinese made phones. Either Chinese companies themselves are selling, or many Indian companies like, what is it, Max or something like that, they all buy the Chinese components. But if you see that last 3-4 years, the average Chinese import to India on mobile phone has actually reduced. The reason, but the share of the Chinese companies in Indian mobile market has increased. The reason is India has a huge market, 130 crore people. So many of these, all the Chinese companies, Xiaomi, Apple, Vivo, all of them have set up factories in India. So they produce in India for Indian market and also for the neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, etc. So the advantage of manufacturing in India is Indians get employment. As you know, the last few years has been disastrous for Indian employment scenario. Last year, an official data given by Labour Bureau says that India is facing the highest ever unemployment in the last 46 years. So any investment which leads to employment is always good. At the same time, we are also reducing the outflow of foreign exchange if it is manufactured within India, because it is not paid in dollars. So China wants to invest in India more. That is the beauty. So take another thing. So the API is Indian generic drug industry is the world's biggest industry. Generic drugs are the drugs for which the patents have expired. So they can be manufactured without paying the royalty to the people who originally discovered that. So Indian companies are the number one in the world. But they don't manufacture the basic raw material, the chemicals which are needed for the drugs. India imports from that. As you from this map, as this shows that for producing manufacturing drugs, 75% of the chemicals needed for manufacturing of drugs is coming from China. And this is the reason India exports mostly drugs to US. That is the reason why India has a trade surplus of $22 billion with US. That's why US wants India to reduce this exports. So this India does not have manufacturing capacity at all. So all the generic drug industry will be completely stopped. Similarly, solar panels, if you take, India has an very ambitious target of replacing thermal power plants with the solar power. We have also signed the Paris Agreement, and we have got commitments, international commitments also. And solar panels only China manufactures. And previously all the Indian people go there and buy that. Now Chinese companies are setting up plants in India to manufacture solar power plants. And not only that, if you take automobiles, a lot of Chinese companies, even last week they have signed an agreement to set up a $1 billion plant in Maharashtra. So Chinese companies are investing a lot in India, which there is no need to stop that, because that causes investment and employment opportunities in India, and physically the investment is within India. So if there is any problem with China, like we can go back to the 1970 era of Indira Gandhi nationalizing so many things there, because that is physically present within India. So they can't take away the factory overnight to China, right? So if you take another thing, the data, this is about Chinese FDI into India. America talks, but American companies never invest. Europe doesn't have any money. So Chinese are investing huge amounts in India. If you see last year, two last years, 2018, $3.84 billion. This is all in billion dollars. Data comes from Bloomberg. And 2019, they have invested $4.14 billion. But this is not the true figure. This is a figure given by an American analyst company, whereas if you take the data from Chinese Commerce Ministry, in 2019 alone, Chinese companies have invested $8 billion in India. The reason why Bloomberg data is much less is because Chinese companies have set up holding companies in Hong Kong, Singapore, Mauritius, etc. So they invest through that channel, taking advantage of the double taxation avoidance agreement. So that is not counted as Chinese FDI. But in reality, China has been increasing its investments in India, and almost everybody purchases from them. Adani, for example, you take Adani's power plant is there, L&T power sector is there, Tata Power is there. Whenever they set any power plant, they purchase boilers and all the electrical equipment from China. whether it is boilers or turbines or transformers. They don't buy from the PSU, Bharat Electricals Limited, Bell. The reason is Bell material, the instruments, the equipments made by them are substandard, and it is also pretty costly. So China's manufacturing cost is 3 to 4 times less than that of US manufacturing costs. So there are many reasons which I don't want. This is not probably the right thing to talk about the reasons behind it. But I'm just talking about the advantages. So here this another data you talk about boycotting Chinese made goods. Chinese investments are there. So just see that in what are the companies, Big Basket. So almost everybody is now buying online after COVID-19. Big Basket, Flipkart, Snapdeal. Snapdeal is down here. Zomato, you are ordering food through Swiggy. Zomato, everything is a Chinese investment. You are buying, Byju's is advertising now through Shah Rukh Khan as a brand ambassador. Where they got the money? Because Tencent of China has invested in that and gave them money. Same thing, you talk about Make My Trip. You are booking your flights through Make My Trip. When you travel, you book Ola cabs. When you go to some place, you book Oyo hotels. When you pay online, you do with Paytm. Policy Bazaar, you buy insurance and all that, you do through Policy Bazaar, Quikka. And you see that. And all these things are essentially flourishing only because of Chinese investments. Out of the 30 big startups in India, we call as unicorns, which are more than $1 billion market capitalization, 18 out of 30, 18 are done with the Chinese money, Chinese investment. And I showed you all these things, what you consider are purely Indian, have majority shareholders are Chinese companies. The bigger thing being Alibaba and Tencent, and other thing is also one purely equity company called Steady View Capital Holdings also. So China is present everywhere. There is no denying that fact. So right now you can't, because as I said, you take any higher, for example, is a Chinese company which is into electronic components and all those things, etc. So if you take 25 years back, Chinese products are considered to be inferior in quality, though they are lesser in price. But now Chinese goods are as good as anybody else, both in quality and price. Nobody can match them. For example, if Indonesia 3-4 years back planned to set up a big high-speed railway network, what you call bullet train. So they gave a global tender, and Chinese companies participated and Japanese also participated. China quoted a price of almost half the price of Japan. So naturally Indonesia awarded the contract to China. So India doesn't want to do that. India has not issued any global tender and unilaterally, without giving any tender, awarded it to Japan at a cost of they say 1 lakh crore between Mumbai to Ahmedabad. China, if you give a global tender, will do it at 50 to 60,000 crores. And China is the world's largest high-speed railway network, 35,000 kilometers, whereas Japan has got the same old around 2,500 kilometers only, and everything is running so smoothly in China. So quality-wise, they are as good as, let's say, Japan or Germany or Korea. But if you talk about cost, they are half of it. They can do it at that price, and they can complete the projects well on time. So that's the advantage, the BRI. That's why China is pushing ahead with this Belt and Road Initiative. So there is very, very little way India can avoid the Chinese juggernaut, whether you like it or not. It is as simple as that. Yes, in the longer run, a country has to be, dependent, self-reliant. That is very important. It is not the case. UK was a very small country, which is of 6.5 crore people. So once it lost the colonies, its economic dominance came to an end. But China has its own domestic economy, huge, 140 crore people, and a very fast growing middle class, and a prosperous country also. So they are not really dependent upon other countries for maintaining their prosperity. That era of containing China by stopping its exports are all over. So India has to learn from China. So China became the factory of the world, not by a fluke, but through a planned stuff. For example, if you take I'm talking comparing the size of the economies. So India's economy in 1950, when both countries became independent, was slightly bigger than that of China. But in 1979, China started its economic reforms. So till that time, India was higher. So, so China has boosted it by that time. But the biggest change came between the year 2000. So I see that China's economy is 1.1 trillion, India is half of that. Then 2010, China 6.5, India 1.2. The gap is now almost five times. And 2020 is again the same 5 times. This thing is being maintained there. So it's very difficult to play catch up. So a country whose economy was same in 1950 has now gone 5 times more, because China started the economic reforms 12 years before India, and it's not the only reason. India opened up FDI and started privatization and all, but that is not the only economic reforms. So it is all about building infrastructure. So India has failed to do so. For example, I will just give you another data. Infrastructure means I am talking about railways and ports, because this will reduce the cost of production. Ports, because you need raw materials, you need intermediate goods, and you need to export, so you need the turnaround time. If you take Singapore or Hong Kong or Dubai, the turnaround time for the ships, that means the ship has to come in, offload the cargo, and then if needed they will take load the cargo also, then go out. That will take typically 1 day. Whereas in India, because of the poor infrastructure, it will take 1 week minimum, sometimes even 10 days also. That's a big problem. If you take railways, again in 1950, at the time of independence, India has almost doubled the length of railways compared to China. Now come to 2019, India has only increased by 14,000 kilometers in the last 75 years, whereas China has leapfrogged to now double that of India. This does not include the 35,000 kilometers of high-speed railway network where they go at 350 kilometers per hour. Whereas in typical speed of the Indian good train is 60 kilometers, and goods train is even lesser than that, 30 kilometers per hour. So what India needs is a rapid modernization of it is very old colonial infrastructure, the crumbling railways which the government wants to privatize. Whereas we have never done any big investments in railways at all. So what happened to the Western Freight Corridor? What happened to the Eastern Freight Corridor? Nothing. Everything. India doesn't have a manufacturing policy after 1992. So what happened to Make in India? What happened to Stagarmala, the port development project? So because all jumla, all rhetoric, all talks, but no money and no investment and no political will to do that. Because the aim of the politician is to loot and then win elections. Whereas China does everything in a strategic manner. They plan. They do everything properly. That's a problem. India doesn't have that manufacturing capacity. So therefore we are importing. We can't change it overnight. I'll tell you one more reason behind that. So what are the reasons why China grew so fast? So there are many reasons. I am giving only few of them. So they didn't say that US is my enemy, I won't call for investment from India. As I said, Apple is manufacturing everything, and Google has its offices there. Everybody is invested in China. They attracted investments from everybody. With Japan, they have got a big territorial dispute. With the Taiwan, they claim that it is part of China, whereas Taiwan says they are independent. With Korea, they have got historical problems. But majority of the investments in China from 1980s and 90s are from these countries only. Whereas India says that it won't, we will stop investment from China. For example, around a month or so back, Indian government announced that any investment from China will come through automatic route. It has to get permission from the government. China didn't do that. And even though last week or so a news report came, China, Japan and South Korea are doing a joint telescope project which is very close to Lahul Spiti district on Chinese side, Tibetan side, very close to Lahul Spiti district in Himachal Pradesh. They are collaborating on various things. China has a great advantage of low labor and market, economy of scale. Another very, very important thing, the size, it matters obviously there. For example, if you take the world's first special economic zone, Shenzhen, which is next to Hong Kong. So Shenzhen, this is Shenzhen. So the size of Shenzhen, this is Shenzhen. and this is Hong Kong. Hong Kong, that time when China started the economic thing in 1980s, was part of UK, not, but they took advantage of the proximity to Hong Kong, and Shenzhen was started. The size of Shenzhen is bigger than that of Goa. And not only that Shenzhen was started in 1980s. That still now is the world's biggest in terms of production. But if you take the last 4-5 years back, China has notified another SEZ, which is now the world's biggest. That is in Hainan Island in South China Sea. This is Hainan Island. So this Hainan Island, the size is bigger than almost the same of the state of Kerala. So that is the size, economy of size. And in that, they will give every facility to the foreign investors and domestic investors. So whether it is land or labor, water, electricity, and you don't have to go anywhere. So you will get every damn thing done. So that is the beauty of China, that they are able to achieve such a fast growth rate. Economy of scale, huge investments in infrastructure, which I talked about, port and railways, and very low corruption. India's corruption in the last 4 years has increased. I am not saying that. Transparency International's corruption perception index says that. Either you have to pay the local politician, you have to pay the state politician, and you have to pay the central politician. And they will come almost every year also, because in some place or something, elections will always be held. And they have also, the ruling party also has to buy the MLAs and also MPs for Rajya Sabha polls also. So they need huge amount of money. So you have to keep on, bribing them, and everybody will lose interest after some time. Huge bureaucratic hurdles, red tape is what you call. So investment climate in AM, because law and order is not there. You don't know when the next riot will be, for what reason, again nobody knows. It could be a communal riot, it could be a caste riot, or it could be just like that time pass riots also. So all these things are a big problem. And China has also created a global value chain network, which includes other countries in East Asia, Japan and Korea, and all the Southeast Asian countries, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, all of them. So if your mobile may consist of 50 parts, that would have been manufactured in 10, 12 different countries. Battery will be from one thing, from memory card will be from some other thing, your touch screen will be from some other country, and ultimately assembled in China. This is called as a global value chain network. India is not part of that. These are the advantages. So China is not India's enemy. So China is India's competitor, whether it is in political arena or in economic arena. So you have to learn from your competitor. You can't crib and say that my friend or somebody I know, we are preparing together, that guy got the service and I didn't get so. You have to learn what he has done. That's what. But India is learning all the wrong things from China. We are learning the how to abuse human rights, how to remove all the basic things, how to suppress the media, how to suppress the judiciary, how judiciary became a part of government, playing ball with them. So these are not the good things to do. Economic things is what we need to know. The so-called market socialism, what China is practicing, the market economy economically, but at the same time controlling the growth of capital and not allowing them to become crony capitalism. So that's what China has showed to the world, how we can build infrastructure in record time. So unfortunately we are not learning all that. We are just talking. The most important thing, if at all, if we start today and plan something, after 15 years you can become a big exporter. You can have export surplus. China is having huge trade surplus. China is having $3.2 trillion forex reserves. That is mainly because of its surplus, trade surplus. Exports are much more than imports to almost every country in the world. India is having trade deficit with almost every country in the world. What India exports to China are raw materials, iron ore, and fruits and rice. Whereas China exports all manufactured goods. This is a big difference there, because we don't have manufacturing capacity. Our cost of production is high simply because we do not have economy of scale. We do not have created infrastructure, our high corruption and bureaucratic hurdles. All these are the problems what we have, and the problem remain the same. Nobody is addressing them. Everybody is using Jumla and just looting the people and cheating the people of India, and again creating symbolisms like boycott and all that, which is not going to take us anywhere basically. Because if you don't buy Chinese phones, are you going to buy Apple and Samsung and pay 5 times more? No. The same thing is true for solar or any equipment. You take it, Chinese can produce it 3 times lower than the cost of Americans or Europeans or Japanese. and that's the success of China. We have to learn from them. That's where we have to become patriots, not nationalists. Nationalists are the people who blindly become bucks and support India, and burn the effigy of Xi Jinping. Is it going to make any difference to China? No, definitely not. A patriot is the one who criticizes the policies because he wants to take the country forward by criticizing, by saying that this is bad and we have to remove this, and this is good in some other country and we have to adopt it. We should not. There is absolutely no need to follow China in politics. That's what India is right now doing. A totalitarian regime is taking shape. That is not good. But we have to follow the Chinese economic miracle, how they have taken millions out of poverty, how they have hugely increased their per capita income, how their economy is 5 times bigger than that of India right now. This is what we need to learn. I hope at least the next government which is going to come in 2024 will at least listen to this particular video and learn from that. Of course, if they come to me, I can speak more, because on this topic I can talk on not only hours and hours, probably days and days, but you don't have the patience to listen to it. So therefore I am bye, take care, and maybe I'll come back tomorrow with some other topic again.